Welcome to NTD Newsroom, or rather NTD News Today. I'm Don Ma. Here are today's top stories. Hundreds of anti-ICE rallies are taking place this weekend in Minnesota, Los Angeles, and New York. Minneapolis police declared an unlawful assembly as protesters targeted in a hotel where ICE officers were staying, prompting dozens of arrests and an injured officer. Retaliation in the Middle East. U.S. forces strike ISIS positions in Syria following a deadly attack late last year that killed American troops. As protests in Iran continue, the regime is now threatening to attack U.S. outposts in the region. What President Trump is saying about the current situation. Ariane Pastar standing by live. We discussed the actions in Venezuela by the U.S., who an analyst says Trump's only crime in Venezuela is winning. Many scientists are talking about metabolic health, the way that our cells make energy, as a core factor in preventing chronic illnesses like Alzheimer's disease. Vital Signs' Brendan Fallon shares insights from leading doctors on how we can naturally safeguard our metabolic health.
This is NTD News Today, live from our global headquarters in New York City.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. Around 1,000 more federal immigration officers were set to be deployed in Minnesota Saturday evening. Riot police were also seen on the streets of Minneapolis following protests and arrests during the weekend. Video shows Riot police taking to the streets of Minneapolis early Saturday morning. Minneapolis police had declared an unlawful assembly Friday night as protesters gathered outside the Canopy Hotel in the city of Minneapolis, where ICE officers were thought to be staying. Police arrested 30 protesters, and one police officer was injured after protesters threw ice, snow, and rocks at officers. One organization behind the rally said hundreds of protests were scheduled in Texas, Arkansas, New Mexico, Ohio, Florida, and other states. Here's Sheriff Wayne Ivey of Brevard County, Florida, addressing the situation.
A firebomb or point a gun at one of our deputies, we will be notifying your family where to collect your remains at, because we will kill you graveyard dead. We're not going to play. This has got to stop. You're watching what's taking place out there. You're seeing police officers that are being attacked, being spit on, being put in harm's way just for doing their jobs. You're seeing ICE agents that are being targeted for doing their jobs. And you're seeing obstructionists that are doing all of this, standing in the way of law and order.
New video released by Homeland Security appears to show the car of Renee Good, who was fatally shot by an immigration officer last week, blocking the street for over 3 minutes, while horns blare and a line of cars wait to pass. Her vehicle is parked diagonally and was free to drive off at any time. Only when ICE officers surrounded the vehicle after minutes of delay does the vehicle actually start to move. White House border czar Tom Homan told the Dr. Phil podcast the officer who took the shot is now receiving death threats.
I've seen today his face all over social media. He's been doxxed. People are threatening to kill him. So he's not good. He fears for him and his family.
Over in Los Angeles, police detained one protester Saturday during an anti-ICE rally in the city. LAPD were seen pushing back protesters that had arrived with equipment. Protesters in downtown Minneapolis causing thousands of dollars in damage to hotels. It happened Friday night at hotels suspected of hosting immigration agents. Here's the update on that.
Escalated from unlawful assembly to quiet streets, hotels in downtown Minneapolis quickly fixing the damage left by anti-immigration demonstrations late Friday night into Saturday morning.
This assembly is unlawful under the laws of the state of Minnesota.
Metal fences and newly posted no trespassing signs zip-tied outside the Depot Renaissance Hotel after Minneapolis police reported graffiti caused $6,000 worth of damage to its windows. Minneapolis Police Department not taking any chances on Saturday night. Cops maintaining a presence both inside and outside of the Depot Renaissance Hotel. The same goes for the Canopy Hotel.
Whistleblowers who provide authorities with information about the Minnesota fraud investigation will get cash payments. That's according to U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent.
We are going to offer whistleblower payments to anyone who wants to tell us the who, what, when, where, and how this fraud has been done.
And the government is investigating allegations that several daycare and food distribution facilities did not provide services, but used the federal funds they were granted to launder money. The Treasury Department is investigating whether Minnesotans' tax dollars have been diverted to Al-Shabaab, a terrorist organization and Al-Qaeda affiliate based in Somalia. A state audit found limited oversight of grant programs that send hundreds of millions of dollars in federal funding to mental health and addiction services. The administration has suspended over $100 million in federal benefit payments to Minnesota. Joining us to discuss is Kervin O'Quinn, former lead intelligence surveillance and reconnaissance coordinator for the U.S. Army. So, Kervin, an Iranian official said this: "Let us be clear. In the case of an attack on Iran, the occupied territories, as well as all U.S. bases and ships, will be our legitimate target." So, you're an expert on this. Interpret it for us.
Yeah, well, first, thanks for having me on. Always good to see you. I would say, first, this is something the Iranian regime has to say. They've got to project power, especially in the region where Israel is starting to expand their sphere of influence. Look, Israel has taken out and completely decimated Iranian proxies like Hezbollah, Hamas, within the region. And so now the people of Iran are rising up against the Iranian regime because the Iranian regime is sending their economic, their money, sending resources over to these proxies in order to attack Israel, and the Iranian people are feeling it in their bank accounts. And because of that, the Trump administration has said, if Iran becomes if Iran becomes violent to the protesters, the U.S. will go in and they will protect these protesters in maybe kinetic ways. That's one of the courses of actions that we heard, is a possible kinetic strike on Iran. Now they're not there yet, so Iran has to project power and tell the rest of the world, because they're not really telling the United States this. They're explaining to the rest of the world, or the Middle East region, that, look, we are still the regime here and we are still powerful and we are going to do everything to protect our power.
Okay, so Kervin, if I remember correctly, President Trump said that the U.S. is lock and loaded if the Iranian regime starts killing protesters. Would this statement have any impact at all on potential U.S. actions that it may be thinking?
Yeah, I think the statement is more of a public statement to the Iranian people. But look, is the U.S. locked and loaded as of right now? Could we send? Could we do a kinetic strike on Iran? Absolutely, but we don't have the resources to do a proper kinetic strike within the country. That's going to take some time. We've got carrier strike groups that are placed all around the globe. We'd have to get one within the region, and the reason for that is not because we can't just go out and strike Iran and be done with it. It's protecting U.S. troops because of the aftermath of that, and protecting Israel because of what would happen after that. We have a regime in Iran that is very close to a nuclear weapon, and we don't know from a covert perspective on if they have anything that can destroy Israel at any given chance. So that's something that that the United States has to understand. They're going to have to, when they're doing their courses of action, this is something that is that's going to have to come out. Can Iran reach our forces in the Middle East? And if they can, without the U.S. being able to protect those forces, any kinetic strike is going to have to be delayed until we can move those assets into the region.
Okay, so you said earlier that the regime has to say this. Are they coming from a place of confidence or nervousness or something else?
Absolutely nervousness. I don't think the regime right now is confident, but they are going to project confidence. Look, we have not seen this in Iran since 1979. Now, I am not going to assume your age, Don. I'm not going to disclose my age, but I was not there for the 1979 Iranian Revolution. But this feels like what we've read in history books, something similar. And the reason this is different is because of the economic aspect to this. If this was ideological, like we've seen before with women rising up to take off the hijab, I think that could be quelled pretty easily. You put a fist down on people and they say, is it really that important? And they for the most part, they'll probably say no. But if you cannot afford bread, if you cannot afford eggs, if you cannot bring dinner to your family, that affects you, and you will rise up and you will do violent things to the regime because of that.
Okay, so if they're coming from a place of nervousness, how worried is the Iranian regime about the protests there potentially being able to threaten its survival or its rule?
I'm very worried. Look, if the reporting is correct, and I have not verified any of the reporting coming out of Iran. It's very difficult to verify that. But if that reporting is correct, we are seeing hundreds of people who are being violently attacked by security forces. The Iranian regime needs to quell these protests in order to keep power. They know that if the people continue on the streets and the economy continues to collapse, their days are numbered. And we could see a very public display of violence from the protesters, something maybe like we saw with Gaddafi years ago.
Do you think the Iranian regime's comments, is that going to deter the U.S. from doing what it wanted to do, if it wanted to do anything in the first place?
Oh, absolutely not. No, we saw with Venezuela, the Trump administration is ready to do anything. The problem here is we need to get the forces in place, the assets in place, and understand. You want to finish that. You want regime change in Iran non-violently from a U.S. perspective, meaning we don't want to put U.S. troops in harm's way to change the Iranian regime. Why not just let the people who are rising up do that for the United States? And then the problem there becomes, what the day after? Who steps into the vacuum? And so I think that is the question that everyone should be looking into. And I think that's what I am starting to unpack over the next few weeks of the day after. Regime change isn't always the best thing. It's the next government that comes could be even more authoritarian.
Okay, Kervin, just one final question here, and I want a quick one from you on Cuba. What do you make of Trump's comments when it comes to Cuba, including saying that it's ready to fall?
Yeah, I think the economy is ready to collapse in Cuba. And look, a lot of the Cuba's stability, which wasn't that very stable to begin with, relied on places like Venezuela and allies like Russia and Iran and China. And now that Venezuela is in a collapse and no longer propping up Cuba, I do think it could collapse from the inside, and it could be very, very quickly. And that could also be true for Colombia and other places that were Venezuelan allies within the region.
Well, okay, Kervin, good to talk to you. Thank you again for coming on.
As always, it's a pleasure. Stay safe out there.
Coming up, the U.S. Embassy in Caracas is urging Americans to leave Venezuela immediately amid reports that armed militias are setting up roadblocks there. Secretary Rubio is set to meet with Danish officials this week amid renewed U.S. interest in Greenland. Poland warns America's Greenland push could strain NATO, while Italy supports a stronger NATO presence in the Arctic. More news in just a moment here on NTD News Today.
Shenyun Creations, the streaming platform from Shenyun, featuring world-class dance, past programs, and all original music. Masterclasses, behind the scenes, comedy, and more. Explore shenyuncreations.com.
Hi, I'm Susan Lucci. You may know me from my many years on television. I never thought about heart disease until I had my own heart event. I felt this slight pressure on my chest, just slight. I thought, oh, it's nothing, it'll go away. I didn't get it. I did not get it. But a few days later, while shopping at a boutique, that pressure returned, much stronger. It felt like an elephant pressing on my chest. I had a 90% blockage in my main artery and a 75% blockage in the adjacent artery. I was rushed into surgery where I received 2 stents in my arteries. Stents developed through research funded by the American Heart Association. Those stents saved my life. That's why I'm in front of you today, asking you to join me in supporting the American Heart Association by becoming a monthly donor. Call now or go to helpheart.org. For only $19 a month, just 63 cents a day, you can help fund the next medical breakthrough. Get the next person trained in CPR, the next hospital certified in high-quality cardiovascular care. I'm so grateful to the American Heart Association. Their research helped save my life. I can enjoy life with my children, my grandchildren, and my friends. Heart disease is America's #1 killer, and your support now can help save your life or the life of someone you love. Give $19 a month with your credit card, and we'll send you this special t-shirt that you can wear to show that you are helping save lives. Please, listen to your heart. The only reason I'm here today is because I did. So please call the number on your screen or go to helpheart.org now. Join me as a monthly donor today and help save even more lives. Thank you.
I've stayed hidden for decades, but I had to come back because they started selling Folicious at Walmart.
This isn't your average soup. It's made with real beef tallow and fresh spices. They think I survive on berries and bark, but this is real pho with real broth. And I'm never going back.
They followed the smell of the pho. I gotta move.
If they find this stash, it's over.
Folicious. Restaurant quality, anywhere.
The United States launching another round of airstrikes Saturday against the terrorist organization ISIS in Syria. The move is in response to a deadly attack that killed American service members late last year. And President Trump is warning Cuba to strike a deal with the United States or face serious economic consequences in a post on Truth Social earlier today. Trump said there will be no more oil or money going to Cuba. He's urging Cuban leaders to negotiate before it's too late. Trump says Cuba has long depended on Venezuelan oil and financial support in exchange for providing security assistance to Venezuelan dictators. He added that according to his social media post, that arrangement is now over and Cuba will no longer receive that support. The warning comes as the Trump administration ramps up pressure across Latin America, tightening sanctions and targeting oil shipments tied to Venezuela. Cuba depends heavily on Venezuelan oil. It imports about 27,000 barrels a day, covering roughly half of Cuba's demand. Any disruption could further strain the island's already fragile economy. So far, Cuban officials have not publicly responded to Trump's post. U.S. Central Command, or CENTCOM, says the strikes were carried out as part of Operation Hawkeye, targeting ISIS positions across Syria. According to one U.S. official, the operation involved more than 24 aircraft firing roughly 90% precision-guided munitions over 35 targets. Video released by CENTCOM shows F-15 fighter jets and A-10 Warthogs taking off, followed by unclassified footage of airstrikes hitting their marks. The military says the mission was launched after a December 13 attack near Palmyra that killed 2 U.S. soldiers and a civilian. The soldiers were identified as Iowa National Guard members, 25-year-old Sergeant Edgar Brian Torres Tovar and 29-year-old Sergeant William Nathaniel Howard. 3 other Guard members were wounded. CENTCOM says the strikes are part of an ongoing effort to prevent future attacks and protect U.S. and allied forces in the region. It added that American and coalition troops remain resolute in pursuing the terrorist organization ISIS. The strikes also come as Syria's government cooperates against ISIS following diplomatic talks at the White House late last year. Here to discuss the recent U.S. actions in Venezuela is Dr. Keith Naughton, co-founder and principal of Silent Majority Strategies. So, Keith, the U.S. Embassy in Caracas issued a new security alert Saturday urging Americans in Venezuela to leave the country immediately, citing threats from armed militias there. How does this align with President Trump's comments that the U.S. is running Venezuela now?
Well, I mean, I think the president got ahead of himself saying that. He tends to do that when he has some success. I don't think the United States is going to be running Venezuela. That would involve an occupation, which Americans, I think, would be foursquare against and would be a terrible idea. But I think we're looking at a longer process here. The fact that the president's removed Maduro has shown American strength, has shown that the Venezuelans have no international allies, that he can block off their oil flow. But at the same time, he's shown a willingness to negotiate with the replacement government, provided they play ball with him. I think that's a positive thing. You know, there's there still is this pro-socialist, nationalist segment of Venezuela that's going to be hostile to the United States, even though I think most people would be glad if that regime was gone. And you're just going to have to deal with it for a while things work out.
Okay, so Keith, there is a bit of controversy on this topic where the U.S. went into Venezuela domestically. So maybe we can get some of your comments on that. We know there were U.S. military forces in Venezuela. There were boots on the ground. Does Trump need congressional approval for that?
Well, I'm not sure that he does because it was Maduro and I think his wife were under indictment. So the question is, how does that apply? And in order to extract him, you certainly have to engage in the activity that the U.S. military did. So I think it's questionable. I think certainly if we were to deploy any forces on the ground, that would require approval. I think Trump's mistake, and he should have done this months ago. I wrote about this in the Hill back in December. He should have announced, again, earlier in his administration, that the United States, our national security threats aren't just soldiers in uniform or declared terrorist organizations. You know, when you've got Venezuela, which is supporting Russia and China, who are geopolitical rivals of the United States, to say the least, who are giving shelter to transnational gangs who are shipping deadly drugs into this country, laundering money, and have abused Americans in Venezuela. We've got to look at national security in that broader light. I mean, if fentanyl's coming into this country and killing 100,000 people every year, that is a national security threat. If you get scam operations stealing billions of dollars from Americans every year, that is a national security threat. He needs to articulate that we need to think about national security much more broadly, and we need to be aggressive and take action. So I think Trump should have done that months ago. You need to match words with action. You need to declare your policy up front. But I fully agree with what Trump did. And I just think that he needs to justify it better up front.
Okay, I want to ask you a question about what you think, whether this is a regime change or not. You're saying you agree with what Trump did. The administration says this is a targeted capture of an indicted criminal. But, you know, some people out there argue that Trump explicitly talked about taking over the oil sector and running Venezuela. Does that make it a regime change in your view, this operation?
Well, I think it's kind of a hybrid. I think you've got the government that's running things was still appointed under Maduro. Trump has also demanded that they have elections, which I think is something people haven't mentioned. I think it's sort of a partial regime change. I don't really have a problem with regime change, especially if it's a regime change that has caused significant damage to the United States. It's destroyed its own economy, oppressed its own citizens, and exported chaos throughout the hemisphere. This allergy to a regime change is a huge mistake. I mean, Russia and China and Iran, they have no problem with a regime change and destabilizing countries that are allies or neutral towards America. So I think if Trump is going to make a regime change, I think that's fine. And I think it's fine to say, look, if you're going to oppose American interests and threaten national security, then you are going to be under threat. I think you have to do it in an intelligent fashion to remove the socialist government and to replace it with the duly elected government. And the socialist government has stolen 2 elections in a row. I think that would be a very serious problem. You would have to put boots on the ground. You would have to have an occupation. You know, the government and the armed forces are suffused with the socialist government. It would be very expensive and very bloody. So I think the president has to be practical about it. You get the biggest problem out now, and you get the regime to work with you later.
Okay, so I've heard a number of arguments against Trump on this. I would just like you to respond to some of these. So what is your response to the argument out there that, you know, a country can't just seize leaders they deem as criminals? Otherwise, any country could do this, essentially, right? What if communist China sees the leader of Taiwan as a criminal and it just goes in and takes the leader of Taiwan?
Well, there's a material difference between Venezuela, where Maduro has stole 2 elections, where he's imprisoned thousands, where he has given shelter to drug runners who are sending drugs to the United States, where he's helping Russia, supporting their war against Ukraine, that he's evading sanctions. He's ignored UN dictates. I mean, Maduro's about the biggest rule breaker in the world. And you're going to say, well, what's the mechanism then to get rid of him? The world's failed for 10 years to deal with this man. Now, then you've got Taiwan, which has been de facto an independent country since 1949. It has a democratically elected government. They show no interest in being part of China. They're very successful, very wealthy. The justification for snatching the president of Taiwan is completely ridiculous. There's absolutely no comparison. And if you get down to it, I think the United States could say, well, whatever your arguments are, Taiwan's an ally of ours. We're going to defend it. Venezuela's an enemy of ours. They're going to pay for it. That's just the way the world works. I think people need to grow up when it comes to geopolitics with these facts.
Okay, just one final question here, and it relates to Cuba because President Trump has talked about Cuba, his comments, including saying that it's ready to fall. So just your overall thoughts on what President Trump has stated when it comes to Cuba.
I fully agree with him. I wrote about this in Hill a year ago. This should be a priority of the United States to get rid of this Cuban regime. Stretching back to when Castro took over, there is a misperception amongst people about the original Cuban Revolution. It was not just Castro and his Marxists marching out of the hills. There were liberal opposition. There were other moderate opposition. It was a broad coalition that supported bringing down Batista and the Cuban regime and that revolution. But Castro hijacked it. He exiled, imprisoned, or murdered all the people who were in favor of elections. He canceled elections. And that Cuban government, they have never held elections. They've had up to approaching 70 years to hold elections. It's an illegitimate government. It has mismanaged the country. It has beaten and imprisoned all of its political opponents. Its jails are bulging and has completely mismanaged the economy. The people are living in absolute misery. Over 3 million Cubans, over a quarter of the population has fled the country in the last 10 years. That's a population collapse. So for the good of Cuba and for the good of the Western Hemisphere and to support democracy, I think Trump should make every effort he can to get rid of that regime. It is an illegitimate regime.
Okay, Dr. Keith Naughton, co-founder and principal of Silent Majority Strategy. Thank you so much for speaking with us today.
Thank you.
Russia fires a hypersonic missile near the NATO border as peace talks continue with Ukraine. Ukraine and its allies say the strike was meant to pressure Europe. President Trump says Putin is afraid of the U.S., but not Europe.
Ukraine said this is the powerful hypersonic missile Russia fired into the western region overnight. The strike was part of a barrage in which Moscow launched 242 drones and 35 other missiles at infrastructure. The target was near the border with NATO and EU member Poland. European allies branded the hit as an attempt to intimidate them from supporting Ukraine. Moscow, which has fired the Oreshnik once before at Ukraine, said the strike was an act of retaliation. It was a response, Russia said, to an attempted drone attack on one of President Vladimir Putin's residences last month. Ukraine denies this attack, calling it an absurd lie, and the United States has also said this did not happen. Moscow says the Oreshnik is impossible to intercept. Defense expert Sebastian Chube said the deadly strike showcased Russia's capabilities.
It is obviously a bit of a warning sign, not only to Ukraine, but also the rest of Europe, considering the cutting-edge technologies that have been used in this attack. Within Europe, there's only a very limited capability that can be effectively utilized against this type of threat.
Residents in Ukraine's capital described the night attack as an act of terror, with one saying it undermines the ongoing peace talks. Ukraine has met with the US and European allies in Paris to negotiate a peace deal before presenting it to Russia. Moscow has shown little indication thus far that it will drop its demands.
Europe has been doing so much for Ukraine, but it hasn't been enough. And obviously that I would say that President Putin is not afraid of Europe. He's afraid of the United States of America, as led by me. There's no fear of Europe.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio will meet with Danish leaders this week as President Trump renews calls for U.S. control of Greenland. The proposal is sounding alarms across Europe, with Poland's prime minister warning the push could strain NATO. Italy's leader disagrees, saying a stronger NATO presence in the Arctic could ease U.S. concerns about growing Russian and Chinese influence in the region. Here's more.
Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk said on Friday he is worried about the strain on NATO caused by the U.S. threat to take over Greenland.
Yes, I'm very concerned about the Greenland issue. And I'm also very concerned about the events in the United States and everything that's building such ideological and political tension within NATO and the United States itself.
Poland views the United States and NATO as crucial to its security in the face of an increasingly assertive Russia, and policymakers in Warsaw fear divisions in the alliance could embolden Moscow. But Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni doesn't think it will happen.
I continue not to believe in the hypothesis that the United States would launch a military action to take control of Greenland, an option that I clearly would not support. I've already put that in writing, but which I believe would benefit no one. I think it wouldn't even benefit the United States of America, to be clear.
Meloni said a reinforced NATO presence in the Arctic would help address U.S. concerns about rival powers gaining influence in the region, reducing pressure for unilateral action by Washington. The U.S. State Department said that Secretary of State Marco Rubio spoke to NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte on Friday and discussed the significance of Arctic security for all NATO allies.
U.S. officials have discussed sending lump sum payments to Greenlanders as part of a bid to convince them to secede from Denmark and potentially join the United States. That's according to 4 sources familiar with the matter. While the exact dollar figure and logistics of any payment are unclear, 2 of the sources said the figures ranged anywhere from $10,000 to $100,000. The idea of directly paying residents of Greenland, an overseas territory of Denmark, offers one explanation of how the U.S. might attempt to buy the island of 57,000 people.
I'm not talking about money for Greenland yet. I might talk about that. But right now, we are going to do something on Greenland, whether they like it or not, because if we don't do it, Russia or China will take over Greenland. And we're not going to have Russia or China as a neighbor.
Authorities in Copenhagen and Nuuk have asserted that Greenland is not for sale. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance on Thursday said acquiring Greenland is important to the U.S.
So what we're asking our European friends to do is to take the security of that landmass more seriously, because if they're not, the United States is going to have to do something about it.
Leaders throughout Europe have reacted to Trump's comments with disdain, particularly given that the U.S. and Denmark are NATO allies, bound by a mutual defense agreement.
Coming up after the break, we're going to have Vital Signs' Brendan Fallon talk to us about how to have more energy in life. Isn't that right, Brandon?
That's right. And metabolic health, the way that our bodies, our cells are producing energy from the food we eat, this is really at the core of what so many scientists and doctors are talking about now, how to make this more efficient to stave off diseases.
Yeah, we can all do with a little more energy. And besides Brandon, we also have Arian Pazdar. This, as protests in Iran continue, the regime is now threatening to attack U.S. outposts in the region. What President Trump is saying about the current situation. Don't go away. More news here on NTD News Today.
That first time seeing my son, I feel like my life did a 180. I was already trying to change my perspective of life and really just be a father figure that I never had. Being present is the most important part. I'm still growing every day. Becoming a better version of myself. To be the better mirror for my son. I mean, he's just growing. He's becoming his own person. Man, first I saw him dance, bro, he brings the vibes, you know what I'm saying? He brings the party no matter what. He really a definition of like why he loves somebody. And I love him to the death of me.
My name's Stacy, I'm 57, and I was adopted in 2020.
We were adopted in 2019.
And we were adopted in 2021.
We had a house, and it sounds crazy, but it wasn't a home. The one thing that Jake and Emma brought is it became a home.
When I met Dakota, he had just turned 14.
You weren't there for the first this and the first that. I missed the first words, but we got a lot of other firsts.
Watching her say, oh my God, I cannot believe I got my license. And she's like, I passed. And I'm like, girl.
See them grow. It is.
They chose to love us. They didn't have to. They chose us. Family.
You and you.
Kids in the middle.
What I thought was a complete life was nowhere near complete, but it is now.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. You can't imagine the reward. Visit adoptuskids.org.
Welcome back to NTD. I'm joined in studio by NTD health correspondent and host of Vital Signs, Brendan Fallon. Vital Signs offers natural and nutritional ways of optimizing our health. So Brandon, I'm looking forward to this. What do you have?
Something I think is quite interesting, Don. Everything seems to be focused now on our mitochondrial health, our metabolic health. This is talking about metabolic health is basically the way the food that we eat is converted into energy that is used by so many of our cells to do what they need to do. And this is being pointed to like a disruption in this metabolic process the mitochondria, which is the battery or the power plant in our cells that's producing the energy, a breakdown in the way this is working, and it's being linked to so many diseases, chronic diseases, Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, all the way to different cancers. This is being looked at as a core reason why people are suffering in this way. And I've spoken to two outstanding doctors. One is Dr. Roger Schwelt, quadruple board certified doctor in pulmonary medicine, which is respiratory diseases, critical care, sleep medicine. And he's up first in this clip we'll show next, talking about how sunlight can help the health of the mitochondria. First, he'll explain how the mitochondria works and how it's like an engine in a car. This is the first clip we'll look at now.
Not to get too technical, but inside of each of our cells is a powerhouse. There's a generator, and that's called the mitochondria. Now, just like engines in our car, the engines produce locomotion, but they also produce a byproduct, which is heat. And if you don't deal with that heat in the engine, as you know, it can shut your engine down. These mitochondria produce energy for the cells so you can be alive and live, but they also produce something called oxidative stress. And if this oxidative stress isn't dealt with, there's a growing body of research that shows that this oxidative stress can cause diabetes, hypertension, a lot of the diseases that we see in Western societies. Not only that, but also dementia. And this oxidative stress has also been tied to things like COVID-19 mortality.
This oxidative stress, this is like the heat in the engine, like it's overheating the engine in this analogy.
That's exactly right. And this oxidative stress can actually damage the mitochondria, and poor functioning mitochondria, poor functioning powerhouses means that the cell is not going to get the energy that it needs, it's not going to metabolize well, and you become a sick individual. Yeah, so you can't ingest it. A lot of people think, oh, I just buy some melatonin and ingest it. This is made on site, right there where the heat is, right there where the heat in the engine is. The way you get more of it is to get more near infrared radiation. And 53% of the energy coming from the sun is in the form of infrared radiation. So getting outside more is really important. You cannot get near infrared radiation from LED lights. You cannot get near infrared radiation from windows where the sun is coming in, especially with the new low E glass. You actually have to get outside. The good news is, though, Brendan, is that you don't have to actually be directly in the sun. You can actually be outside. This near infrared radiation, we feel it on the sun as heat. You know, if you go outside, you have a t-shirt on and you feel that sun on your back, that heat that you feel is actually near infrared radiation penetrating down through your skin into your body and stimulating your heat receptors.
You know, that's kind of interesting, because it makes me think that, you know, in a certain degree, we have more in common with plants, at least than I previously thought. And he talked about relationships as well. It was in the Chiron there, love, right? So, I mean, that kind of makes sense as well. What kind of relationships are we talking about here that's going to make you feel more energetic?
I think basically caring relationships, Don, and this is what the next doctor we're going to show a clip for coming up. That's what she talks about. This is Dr. Molly Maloof, physician and author of the Spark Factor. There's this alongside melatonin, which we just heard about, which you know, I just used to think this is something you take to help you sleep better. If you've got a long flight overseas, you take this, it's going to help your circadian rhythm get back on track. You get a better night's sleep. But actually, it's the master antioxidant in the body. Sunlight comes in, can reach, new studies are showing it can reach into the cells, stimulate the mitochondria to produce melatonin, which also has this dampening effect on this oxidative stress. And then this engine can run better. This oxidative stress isn't going to be harming the mitochondria, and you're going to get the energy you need.
Okay. So yeah, let's take a look at that second doctor and what he has to say.
When you experience a safe, loving relationship where you trust someone and you feel calm in their presence and your nervous system is regulated, there's a sense of empathy and compassion. You get oxytocin released. And oxytocin is this incredible neuropeptide that everyone produces that's responsible for social connection. It's also responsible for birth, for breastfeeding, for pair bonding, for parent-child bonds. It's literally the bonding hormone. It's really nature's medicine, and it's an antioxidant, it's an anti-inflammatory, which directly improves mitochondrial function, and it also protects the heart, and it's anti-cancer. Literally caring for someone is giving them medicine. Giving someone a hug is giving them medicine. Giving someone a shoulder massage is giving them medicine.
I guess the takeaway from that is we should hug more. I don't know.
I think for one, what I take away from it is look for a way to have positive relationships over negative ones. And I think if you can reach out and extend to more people and get positive energy out and impact people in a positive way, it kind of drowns out the negativity you might have in your life. That's what I'm finding myself now, and helping to stimulate that oxytocin, this bonding hormone that can also dampen this oxidative stress, to have that mitochondrial engine running better and not having that mitochondria damaged and getting the energy you need from your cells.
Okay, well, sounds good. If you want to find out more about that interview, you can go online to the Epoch Times and see the interview with the two doctors there. Just type into your browser ept.ms/lovescience. Coming up, as electric vehicles go more mainstream on roads, electric vehicles on the water may be next. Former Tesla and Rivian engineers are betting a quieter future powered by all-electric boats. At this year's Consumer Electronics Show, AI is stepping into daily life, from health monitoring to lifelike machines. The technology is advancing fast, prompting both excitement and concern. More news in just a moment here on NTD News Today.
This land, our America, built on hard work, determination, and grit. Sometimes the days run long, but hope, it never runs out, even when the food does, for America's veterans, working parents, even kids. Because in every corner of every town, even yours, millions of hard-working neighbors are facing a hunger crisis, many for the very first time. In this land of plenty, affording food shouldn't require second jobs and third shifts or choosing between your groceries and bills. Today, you can help change that. Call or go online to helpfeedingamerica.org and give $19 a month, less than 63 cents a day, to help every neighbor get the food they urgently need. Because taking care of each other is what makes America strong. We're Feeding America, not just a name, but an action. Working with over 200 local food banks like the ones in your community, and demand is soaring.
You go to the grocery store, you spend $100, and $100 is a new $20 bill.
Even with 2 full-time jobs, it's hard to make ends meet.
These are tough times, but when we stand together, we become the very best of a strong America. Please call or go online to helpfeedingamerica.org. Just $19 a month can feed a family today. And your first gift can double an impact. Plus, we'll send you this free canvas bag as a reminder of the hope you're delivering.
When it comes down to it, it's about taking care of your family first and the loved ones that you need to provide for.
Because you're not just giving food, you're fueling resilience for people across the nation. You're feeding America. Call or go online today to helpfeedingamerica.org, and your gift can double an impact.
I'm Jonathan Lawson. If you're 50 to 85, please listen closely. The lock I want to talk to you about isn't the one on your door. It's a rate lock for your life insurance that guarantees that once you're insured, your rate can never go up at any time for any reason. Many policies you see don't have one, but you can get a lifetime rate lock from Colonial Penn. This plan was designed for people on a fixed income with coverage options that start at $9.95 a month. That's less than 35 cents a day. Your rate is locked in for life. Coverage can never be canceled, and your acceptance is guaranteed. You cannot be turned down because of your health. See for yourself. Call for an information kit and gift. Both are free with no obligation.
Call 1-800-624-6556 for your free information and your free gift. That's 1-800-624-6556. 1-800-624-6556. Call now.
As electric vehicles become more widespread on roads, a group of former Tesla and Rivian engineers are turning their attention to water. With all electric wake sport boats to center console fishing boats and even larger vessels, Will the world's waterways become quieter in the future?
Carving silently across Lake Mead, a reservoir situated about 30 minutes southeast of Las Vegas, Nevada, this boat offers a glimpse of a future where water sports leave nothing behind but a clean wake. The all-electric wake sport boat is part of its creator's bold bet that the marine world is ready to go electric. Built by California-based startup ARC and designed by a team of former Tesla and Rivian engineers, the 23-foot ARC Sport EV brings Silicon Valley to the water. Mitch Lee is the co-founder of ARC.
It's a fully electric wake sport boat, 23 feet, 500 horsepower. It has a giant battery on board, and it gives you hours of fun out on the water without any of the fumes, any of the noise, any of the maintenance burdens of a gas boat. On the water, the ARC Sport gives you an experience that is quieter. You don't have the fumes from a gas engine. It's more performant. You have so much more power and torque available to you. It's all software enabled, and it's actually cheaper to operate. More convenient to charge a boat overnight than it is to lug gas cans down to the dock. And then once you take it off of the water, you don't have the maintenance headaches, you don't need to winterize it.
According to Lee, on a single charge, the boat can handle 4 to 6 hours of active use, with an overnight charge on a level 2 charger delivering a full battery by morning. Beyond the powertrain, ARC leans heavily into software.
One touch of a button, you can configure the ballast system, the control surfaces, the cruise control for it, to throw that perfect surf wave on one side of the boat or the other. I think that electric boats make even more sense. That electric cars have pretty stiff competition in gas cars. Those gas cars are reliable, they're inexpensive, they're convenient, they're quiet. They've had a bunch of money put into R&D over the span of 100 years. Gas boats are not the same level of competition. And by going electric, you solve a bunch of very acute pain points with owning a gas boat.
But ARC's technology comes at a premium. The ARC Sport EV boat starts at $268,000. Yet Lee says demand has not been an issue, with the Wake Sport boat being just the beginning.
We've already announced our next product that comes after this, which is a center console boat for fishing and leisure activities, and have also expanded into the commercial space as well with larger vessels, harbor craft. You could think of tugboats and ferries. So taking that same technology and scaling it up to those applications.
That's all for today's news. Thank you for tuning in. Stay with us for NTD Evening News at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific.
you